Now, back to Willard and Dibs.
Absolute pleasure. Willard and Dibs, y'all take it easy. Have a good one. Enjoy the game tonight.
On 95.7 The Game.
Welcome back. Willard and Dibs continues. No Mark Willard today or this week. It's FP Santangelo, Dan Dibley, Mark Randy with you here on 95.7 The Game. We are presented by Fremont Bank, celebrating 60 years of full-service banking with no compromises. And now we go out to our River Islands guest line. Isn't it time for you to discover the islands, River Islands in Lathrop? And FP, we got a good friend of yours on the line, huh?
Yeah, Northern Illinois University's finest, former GM of the Dodgers, former assistant GM of your San Francisco Giants, and more importantly than all those, a friend of mine, Ned Colletti, joins us right now to talk a little trade deadline. Ned, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for the introduction. Haven't been introduced as an NIU guy in quite a while.
Yeah, Northern Illinois University. Now you're a professor at Pepperdine, so I don't even know who you are anymore. Sports administration professor. You're so smart. You're smarter than all. Hey, well, how do you feel about this time of year? Do you miss it? Does your blood start to pump a little bit? Do you miss the trade deadline, or did you not like it at all when you were a general manager?
Oh, gosh, it was the best time. It was the absolute best. Most of the teams that I worked with the last 25 years were competing, had a chance to win. And so this is where you have a chance to make a difference. And this is where, as you know, FP as a player, when somebody walks in that room on August 1st after a 31st deadline or whatever the deadline is, makes a big difference. So having a chance to show your team that you've been paying attention to their hard work and what they've put forth for 2/3 of the season, this was the best 2 or 3 days of the season besides the postseason.
Is it tougher now than ever for GMs? Because with the third wild card in each league, it feels like more teams are still in it than ever before.
No doubt. It has changed the dynamic to it. You know, there's always going to be a give and take when you change who enters the postseason. I think it's great for the game that there's more teams involved and more fans think their team has got a chance. And for some cities that haven't been to the postseason for a long time, you know, it's a big deal. But it does limit the market, and it does make those who do have quality players that they can move. It puts them in a really, really good spot, a better spot than when you have fewer teams making the postseason. So while you have fewer choices sometimes, those teams that do have the flexibility to make a move, they can make a haul, especially if they've got some talent.
With that in mind, Ned, you have a team like the Giants in the current situation. They're 3.5 back of a wild card spot, but they just won 4 games in a row. How do you determine when there are so many teams that qualify for the playoffs and so many teams that are still alive like the Giants? How do you determine if the team is good enough or worthy of a big move to go out there and help the team? Because I would imagine, you know, back in the days when there were only a handful of teams that would make the playoffs from every league, a team that's 2 games under 500 like the Giants, you might consider them easy sellers. Now it's hard to see them selling because they're only 3.5 games out. So how do you determine if a team deserves the GM and the front office to go out there and take a big swing?
Well, I think the most important thing for a club at this stage is to be honest with where you're at. You can't wish for something. You can't hope. You've watched your team play close to probably 110 games at this point in time for every team. You know how good they are. You know if they've underachieved. I'm not talking about the Giants. I'm just talking in general. You know if they've underachieved. You know if they've been banged up all year, and now they're starting to get healthy. You know where your team is at, and you got to be honest with it. If you don't think your team can make it, you can't really do much adding. You know, if you're the Cubs, what the Cubs have done the last couple of days, pretty interesting. They're kind of playing it midway this year, but they're really looking more towards 25 and beyond, which is I think where they're at, and they're farther back than San Francisco. They're, I think, a game and a half behind San Fran. It's a wise way to do it. I think the Giants are in a tough spot, but they know who they are, and so as long as they're honest with who they believe they are from an ownership front office standpoint, you know, they'll make the right decision, whatever that is. You know, they are 3.5 back, but they're also behind Pittsburgh, they're behind St. Louis, they're behind Arizona. The who are also trying to get in. Those teams aren't even in yet. So while you're 3.5 back, I think a game and a half back of Pittsburgh. To me, you're 3.5 back, but then you're a game and a half back too. So you're 5 back. I think the Cardinals are 2.5 behind the Cardinals. So you're like 7.5 back. And then you're 3 behind Arizona. So now you're getting like 10 back. Now, you can pick up, that's a weird way of looking at how far behind you are, but those are the teams you're going to have to catch to do it. Now, on a given day, you can pick up 2 or 3 games in that way of mathematically looking at it. But the most important thing, you got to be realistic with how good your team is. Giants had some pitching coming back. They've been waiting all year for some guys to come back. They may feel that they've got a chance. You also know the health of your club better than any other club knows the health of your club, better than the media knows the health of your club. You know where guys are at. You know if pitchers are starting to get a little bit finicky, may start to lose some stuff, may pull back a little bit, or are just starting to getting in their groove. So you got to know all those things to make these types of decisions, because you can't do it in a vacuum, but you got to know really how good your team is. And is it worth it? Is it worth it to add if you may get in, but you may only be in for a few games. So you got to measure that too. So a lot of different things you got to be thinking about.
He was a GM of the Dodgers from 2006 to 2014, assistant GM under Brian Sabian for our San Francisco Giants. Ned Colletti, nice enough to join us today. So you just answered my first question. I got 2 for you. What does making it mean? You said if you're going to make it, does it make it to the playoffs? Can you beat the Phillies? Like, what if you're a National League GM right now on the outside looking in? What is your opinion of making it?
Well, making the playoffs. Can you get in? You have a legitimate chance to get in if you make a move, or you kind of stand pat and just hope your team plays better. Making it for me is getting in the playoffs. But as I said, getting in is one thing. Being realistic to your chances to compete with the teams that are at the top of it, that's a different story. If you go back, and this goes back a long time now, the big trade that Say's made with the White Sox in '97. First year as a GM, picked up Roberto Hernandez and Wilson Alvarez and Danny Darwin. The White Sox were 3 games out when they did it. And Ron Shula, the GM of the Sox, was criticized for doing it. But he said, look, I don't think we may get in. We may end up catching Cleveland and getting in. But I don't know that we have enough to compete any further than just getting in. And so I've got a chance to pick up 5 prospects. Bobby Howry was in that deal, pitching the big leagues for a long time. Keith Folk helped win a World Series in Boston, and so they did what they did. So, but you got to be realistic. Can you get in? And if you do get in, can you make a run? And if you haven't been in for a while, then it's vital that you get in and you establish that and you tell your fans that, hey, we got in, but if you've been in a lot and you really need to refurbish your farm system and add a player or 2 that's going to help you really get in the next year or the year after, you got to measure that consequence too. And the Giants are sitting in a very interesting spot. They are behind 3 other teams just to get in, besides the teams that are already sitting in that spot. But they've also got Snell, who, if they decide to make him available in the next day, that's the best starting pitcher out there. How much can you get for him? Now, when I say that, I also know that just because you would make him available doesn't mean that he's going to do it, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get enough from him, from another team, to make it worth your while of sacrificing where you're at. Again, there's so many different things that go through GM's minds this time of year. It gets complicated, and that's why it's exciting. You got a chance to make yourself better, but you've also got a risk that comes with the territory.
Ned, I've always wondered this as a player, and I've never been privy to this. Like, take us behind the scenes. Like, how does this all go down? And maybe you can give us an example of something where you talk to another GM and you guys are, do we pull the trigger? Does it come from ownership? Like, tell me how this, like, for all of us listening that have never been in a war room for a trade deadline, tell us how this whole thing goes down and how it works behind the scenes.
Well, it builds for a while. You get to you're always checking in with other teams throughout the spring, throughout the first 2-3 months of the season. You get to the All-Star break, and now things start to become more in focused. And so now your calls become a little bit more regular, but you know who's got who and who's thinking about moving a player, who will definitely move a player. You kind of know. And then you'll have a little bit of a rush like we've seen. And then typically when you get to this point, it gets quiet for a little while because the teams that are going to trade somebody, they don't have anything to lose right now. They're going to play it out until you get to 90 minutes before the deadline, 60 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes. You can bluff all the way to the end, as long as you don't lose the opportunity that you're trying to bluff your way to get a little bit more from a club. Ownership is always involved. They always know what you're thinking. They always know what it's going to cost payroll-wise, what it's going to cost prospect-wise. You're in touch with them constantly. We would always have, you got your inner circle. You've got a lot of people that work, but you're not going to bring in 100 people into a meeting for the trade deadline. You're going to be in contact with everybody, all your scouts, all your player development people. You need to know your system inside and out. You need to know who the real players are, who can help your team in the market you're in. Not everybody can be a Yankee. Not everybody can be a Red Sox. Not everybody can be a Philly. Not everybody can be a Dodger because of the expectation that sits with those franchises. So you may have a player with a pretty good ceiling, but they're just not made for that bright a spotlight. Those are guys that, hey, you may have a great market for that player as a prospect, or some service or some publication may rank somebody really high. In your heart of hearts, that's not the player. That's not how this player is going to be. He's not going to graduate to the level that a publication that has really no skin in the game is putting out there. But there may be somebody that reads that or has an appeal for that player. So you use the increased value on the outside to make the move. And you do that. But you got your inner circle. You got your people that inside out. You've scouted your scouts. You know your inner circle. You know how they think. You have hour upon hour of conversation in the week before this to really kind of fine-tune what are we doing, what are we looking for, who's available, who is really available, who is likely to be talked about but never become available, and where your seriousness lies. And I had 5 really good veteran guys that had great careers, not Hall of Fame careers, but were solid teammates. Billy Miller, Aaron Seeley, Mark Sweeney, Jose Vizcaino, Juan Castro, Josh Bard. And their job was to go through our system. They were just out of the game. They needed to spend more time at home. They've been on the road for a long time. Needed more family time. But their job was to go out and see your 4 minor league teams, your AAA, AA, and the 2 high A, the high A and the low A, and know everybody on it. Not who can play, but really what is the character of the people? Who is a winning type of player? May not be the leading hitter, may not be the guy with the best stuff off the mound, but this guy competes. This guy can do it. Because those are the names I just listed to you guys. Some of them were Giants. Some of them inside out. FP. Some of them you probably played against. You know how they competed. And so I would trust them implicitly with who they thought could be a Dodger. Or in the Giant days, Sage would do who they thought could be a great Giant. And those are the people you push to the side and you don't let them out. You don't let those players go. But some of those guys that got high rankings on the outside, when you know from the people you trust implicitly, hey, they may make it to the big leagues, but they're not going to help a team win a World Series. That's all Sabes and I ever did, was try to get to the World Series and try and win it. And some teams being less than that is okay. It wasn't okay for us. So that's another thing that you do. And that group is always in your office on these type of days and the days leading up to it. And I'd ask my pitching guys about hitters. I ask my hitting guys about pitchers. Sometimes you ask the hitters about the hitters or the pitchers about the pitchers. But I wanted to know Aaron Seeley, what he thought of hitters we were chasing, what he thought, how he would approach them, and how he knew about our prospects, how if he thought that they could adjust to the part of their approach or whatever that was lacking, and vice versa. Billy Miller about pitching, Mark Sweeney about pitching, all these guys. So anyway, I'm getting long-winded here.
No, these are great names too, Ned. I mean, it's awesome. You're flashing me back. Yeah, it's so great. Ned Colletti here on 95.7 The Game, former GM. So I just want to ask you this, Ned, and if you get to this spot, and we are now 23 hours and 40 minutes away from the deadline, if you're in Farhan Zaidi's spot, do you know which way you're going to go? Does your opinion of what you're going to do at the deadline change based on wins and losses, or do you already have a plan charted by the time you get to this date?
I think everybody kind of knows what they're going to do. Now, does that change if you get a call you can't say no to? Absolutely, because there's teams that have made moves. There's been a lot of moves already, but there's teams that are bluffing. There's teams that are holding out for one more player, or the team that is chasing the ring. They're trying to give up one less guy. All the bluff comes off with an hour ago. 90 minutes, as I said, 90 minutes, 60 minutes, all that bluffing goes away. And you'll find out everybody shows their cards and everybody just tells you, okay, I'll do this, I won't do that. This is how I'll do it, A or B. And that still hasn't unfolded quite yet. Been a lot of movement. But a lot of the movement has been maybe teams trying to save payroll because guys make so much on a daily basis. You save a day, you save 2 days, you save 3 days. You might be paying for 3 scouts' salary. Who knows? But other than that, when you got big names and things like that, at this stage there's no reason to wait except to get a better offer back. And so you play that game, you play that cat and mouse. A lot of things can happen that haven't necessarily started yet until tomorrow morning.
Would you trade Blake Snell for the right haul?
If it was a phone call I couldn't hang up from, yeah.
What would that phone call look like? Like three of the best prospects. Your scouts have scouted them. They know they're winning players. They're good people. They're gamers.
It would take some. Yeah, it would take some that got your attention, and that you've done all your due diligence on as best you can, and you know that these players are going to help your team. One may help your team this year, and another one may help your team next year, and the third one may help your team 2 years from now. But they're definitively going to improve your club. Then you don't hang up and you do it. But again, it's easier to say that than to do that because you've got to have the other team that's got the interest in the player. And I think Blake may have a no movement clause. I'm not sure. But, the other team's got to have the interest player plus the capital of prospects to do that. And so, you're very limited as to where you would go with that idea. And it's probably a situation that I'm just guessing here. I don't have any insight into it, that maybe Farhan's not making calls on Snell. Maybe he's just willing to listen to what somebody's got in mind. Teams that are paying attention and they know where the Giants are sitting, kind of half in, half out, they may be calling and say, hey, would you move Snell? And the answer would be, well, tell me what's your interest level? What are you thinking? Or maybe right away the team doesn't have what you're going to need to make that move. And so you say, you know what, I might, but I don't know that that you could entice me to do it.
Wow. Good stuff, Ned. Hey, before you go, I know you've been in baseball for a very long time, but you're currently a scout for the Sharks. Those of us here in the Bay Area, of course, very fired up about Macklin Celebrini. What can you tell us about the newest Shark?
Oh goodness, this team is turning the corner. He is a great young person. He is a difference maker almost immediately. He's 18 years old. There's still some physical growth to him, but he can flat out play, and he's been a champion throughout his career as a amateur. Played well for BU last year. We are so excited to have him and some of the other players that our scouts have found worldwide. I mean, it's starting to turn. Last year's draft with Will Smith, another great young player that's going to change the dynamics of the club. William Eklund from a couple years before that, same thing. So the team is getting younger. We've added some good veterans to it. Tyler Toffoli, who I've known for a long time from his LA days, and we see each other all the time in the South Bay down there. So it's getting better. It takes time. The NHL is different than Major League Baseball. The NHL's got that hard cap. It's not a high cap. It's not like the NBA has or the NFL. So when you go for it and you go all in, which the organization did for a long time with probably 20 great years, no cups, but 20 great years of having a chance, you trade off picks, you trade off prospects sometimes to add to what you have. And when you do that, and you see it in hockey all the time, teams go through that cycle. The Chicago Blackhawks won 3 out of 5, okay? And then they struggled mightily for the last few years, had the number 1 pick a year ago. Tampa is trying to straddle that line right now. The LA Kings went through it. So it's part of the cycle of the sport, but this organization is definitely on the upswing. It's going to be an exciting team. It's going to be a young team. And I can't wait for that season to get going and to get to camp, because it's going to be exciting watching him. He is a true difference maker, outstanding person, ties to the Bay Area, and he's a great player. He's a difference-making franchise-type player.
Wow. Great to hear. We're getting excited about the Sharks season as well. Should be a ton of fun. Hey, Ned, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it, and we'll catch up with you later.
Always good, gentlemen. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Ned. He's the best.
That was awesome. Good work, FP. Something that you said there towards the end, talking about what what it looks like. You asked, take us behind the scenes. How does this look? The day of the deadline. He says, quote, bluffing goes away with an hour to go. With an hour to go, you get 60 minutes up on that clock. You only have 60 minutes to make a move. Everyone gets down to business finally after, you're BSing each other for the weeks leading up to the deadline, I'm sure, and then it all gets real with 60 minutes left.
That's why I said earlier, you need a stone cold killer to make the move. Like, you can have all the information and all the data. You could have done all your homework. You got your guys in the room. But to actually pull the trigger with an hour left or 30 minutes left on a big deal that could alter the course of your franchise over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Maybe beyond that. I mean, if it's a really good or really bad, you could change the direction of a franchise.
You got to be a badass dude to pull that trigger, man. I'm telling you.
And I just wonder about Farhan Zaidi, because most of the trades he's made are these like bottom of the roster micro style deals, but you're at this deadline. You're 3.5 back. You've got Blake Snell. You've got a monster piece. I mean, this would be the time when you need to have somebody make a big, bold move. If you're going to make a move involving Snell or Doval, Conforto or Chapman, these could be big franchise-altering moves, and it hasn't really been his MO so far here with the Giants.
Yeah, I agree.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and we got some text coming in here on the Xfinity Mobile text line, very complimentary of Ned. And I think, just reading between the lines, they're not the biggest belief from Giants fans in Farhan, who's currently calling the shots for the Giants. All right, time for a break here on Willard and Dibs. It's FP, Grandy, and Dibs in for Mark Willard today here on 95.7 The Game. Time for a break, but when we come back, we'll get into a whole lot more relating to the Giants and the trade deadline. And remember, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Willard and Dibs on the free Odyssey app or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And while you're there, make sure to check out Mark Schlereth's conversation on Steiny and Guru earlier today. He had some fiery thoughts about Brandon Ayuk and his hold-in down in Santa Clara. We can get into that a little later on during the show as well. But Willard and Dibs, FP and Grandy and Dibs, more coming up on the other side here on 95.7 The Game.